Welcome to the CB Brothers podcast. Today we are continuing our return to the world of the Pulp Hero cinematic universe. As we had discussed before, Phase 1 was all about introducing our heroes, setting up the world, bringing them together. Now that the champions of justice have been formed and New York / the country have been saved, the heroes return to their homes and continue their own stories. In our last video, we talked about Zorro, Indiana Jones, and Dicktracy. Join us today as we jump into what is happening with the other heroes. I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, leave a comment. If you don't, leave a comment. Let's jump into the Pulp Hero Cinematic Universe, Phase 2, Part 2. Docsavage, Death in Silver, 1938. After his mission with the Champions of Justice, Docsavage offered his Manhattan base, his famed Fortress of Solitude, as the official headquarters of the team. His brilliant brain trust began working alongside the Allied operatives across the country to help elevate each of the individual groups. Among those who stayed at Savage's home was Kit Walker, the Phantom, seeking time and space to regroup after the latest battle. But New York was never quiet for long. Savage soon noticed a troubling pattern, a series of precise, high-stakes robberies, all executed with military precision, and a strange silver calling card left at each scene. The culprits identified themselves only as the Silver Death. Savage's instincts told him that this was no ordinary criminal outfit. It was personal now. It was happening in his city under his watch. With his team of scientific and strategic minds, Savage dug deeper. What they uncovered was staggering. A multi-pronged operation involving armed heists, hostile takeovers, buyouts, and targeted stock market manipulations. The Silver Death was no gang. It was a hidden syndicate waging a quiet war for the economic control of New York City. The more Savage uncovered, the more it seemed this group had infiltrated every level of power, from boardrooms to the docks. The trail led Savage to Winthrop shipping yards, where he met Lorna Vale, Winthrop's sharp and inquisitive secretary, and Henry Trent, the shipyard's earnest chief engineer. Both had noticed unusual discrepancies, deals that didn't add up, shipments that vanished, and strange surge in business that tied to companies with murky ownership. Before Savage could dig any further, the shipyard was attacked. Savage fought off the assailants and managed to get Lorna and Harry to safety. His cousin, Patricia, Pat Savage, offered them sanctuary in her apartment. As they regrouped, they traced the timeline. The strange dealings began about 2 years before, the night after Winthrop had quietly took an unnamed business partner. Savage and Harry followed the money trail, tracking it through shell companies and illegal trades. Lorna and Pat worked to unmask the shadowy benefactor. But just as they had closed in, disaster struck. Lorna and Pat were abducted by the Silver Death. Savage and Henry returned to find Pat's apartment in ruins, but not without clues. Using their keen detective skills and field experience, they tracked the syndicate to an abandoned power plant on the waterfront. There, in a daring rescue, they freed Lorna and Pat and uncovered the truth. Winthrop himself was the mastermind behind the Silver Death. Using his position and resources, he orchestrated a long game, engineering chaos in the shipping industry, manipulating companies, competitors, and posing himself as the only viable operator in New York's harbor. Once he had consolidated power, he planned to buy out the remaining rivals using one of his own shell companies and form an unstoppable monopoly. Winthrop had used every tool at his disposal: bribes, blackmail, sabotage, corporate espionage. But in the end, he couldn't count on Docsavage. He certainly hadn't counted on the courage of those he had tried to manipulate. Together, Savage, Harry, Lorna, and Pat brought Winthrop to justice, unraveling the web of crime he had built and restoring balance to the city's industrial core. In the quiet that followed, Harry finally found the courage to tell Lorna how he felt, something he had buried beneath years of doubt and duty. To his surprise, the feeling was mutual. Docsavage had once again saved the day. Post-credit scene. Captain Seize was approached by a mysterious figure who offered him the location of the hidden tribe in Hidalgo, Mexico, and a way to take Docsavage and his father out. In return, all the man asked for was help with his plan for the country in the future. The man then introduced Captain Seize to Mr. Winthrop. The Rocketeer 2, Trouble in the South Sea, 1939. After helping form the Champions of Justice, Cliff Seacourt and his trusty mechanic, Peavy, returned to California with a new purpose. Their time with the team had left them inspired and ready to upgrade. With the help of Peavy and a few scientific minds of the Champions, the jetpack had been fully refined, faster, stronger, and more maneuverable than ever. Cliff was determined to be more than just a lucky daredevil in a rocket suit. He wanted to be a real hero. Back home, Peavy worked tirelessly on the new flight suit, one that was safer and more iconic, a symbol the people could rally behind. Meanwhile, Jenny Blake, now a glamorous public face of the bustling airplane raceway, became the grounded heart of the team. Her message to Cliff never changed: come home safe. But with every mission, that promise felt harder and harder to keep. The raceway, now under new management, had transformed into a roaring success, drawing crowds for both trick flying and for racing. Cliff and the others wowed the audience with their precision and flair. All the while holding a double life, Cliff led to helping the people as the Rocketeer. Jenny was a beautiful announcer and the public face of the whole business, but fame and heroism often casts a long shadow. One night, during a run-in with street-level criminals, Cliff unknowingly crossed paths with a familiar face, Eddie Valentine, the mobster he had stumbled into during his race to save Jenny the year before. Valentine, though grateful for Cliff saving his crew from the Nazis, spared Cliff's life, but not without a warning. "This is my town, Rocketeer. Stay away, or there will not be a next time." Cliff returned shaken, but emboldened. He promised Jenny he'd be more careful, and he meant it. But close calls had a way of feeding his confidence, not crumbling it. Cliff believed he could do both, be a better hero and keep his promise to Jenny. He had to just try harder. Then came the ambush. While investigating a suspicious weapons deal involving Valentine's men, Cliff was spotted. They opened fire. The jetpack was damaged mid-flight, and Cliff was shot. Barely conscious, he crash-landed at the raceway. Jenny was waiting and furious, not just because Cliff had been hurt, but because he had broken his word. Peavy arrived soon after, and the trio faced a hard truth. Brute force and blind risk had caught up with them. With the Rocketeer grounded and Valentine now hunting them, they needed a new plan. One not built on speed or firepower, but strategy, teamwork, and trust. Together they hatched a plan, using the insider knowledge and help from Officer Chris Delgado, a cop who had grown to trust the Rocketeer. They staged a fake meeting. The bait? The Rocketeer, seemingly ready for his final showdown. Believing the jetpack was still functional, Valentine came in force, only to walk straight into the ambush. The police, tipped off and ready, moved in. Thanks to the evidence Cliff and Jenny had quietly gathered over the past few weeks, Officer Delgado and the authorities had everything they needed to take Valentine and his operation down for good. The bust was clean, no casualties, no near misses, just good planning and cooperation. In the aftermath, Cliff finally understood heroism was not just daring stunts or last-second rescues. It was about relying on others, knowing your limits, and making smart choices for the good of those around you. Jenny wasn't asking him to stop being a hero. She just wanted him to be a smarter one. The police now viewed the Rocketeer not as a rogue vigilante, but as a trusted ally. And the team, Cliff, Jenny, and PB, emerged stronger, closer, and ready for whatever would come next. Sometimes the hardest lesson isn't how to fly, but knowing when to land. Post-credit scene. Indiana Jones came to the raceway to ask Cliff's help in recruiting a new hero in LA. The new hero seemed to have taken up the mantle of Zorro. Cliff had heard of the Zorro, but thought it was just a myth rather than a man. The Love of the Phantom, 1939. After his time with the Champions of Justice, Kit Walker returned to New York, not to face a global threat, but a far more daunting one, resolving his unresolved feelings for Diana Palmer. Though the city buzzed with activity and rising crime, Kit remained on fixing one thing, rekindling that relationship with Diana. He took up residence in Docsavage's home with his team, who were in the middle of starting an investigation into a string of high-end robberies. But Kit wasn't ready to engage in their mission, not yet. When Kit found Diana, the sight of her stopped him cold. She was smiling, radiant, and walking beside a charismatic man named Lee DePaul. Kit hesitated. Part of Kit wanted to walk away, convinced he was too late. Another part whispered that he didn't deserve her, that after everything he had done as the Phantom, he had become too much of a ghost to those he truly loved. Before he could speak to either of them, chaos erupted. A violent attacker named Manuel Ortega ambushed them in Central Park. Kit rushed in as the Phantom, fighting to protect Diana and Lee. Diana and Lee escaped, and the Phantom barely survived the battle. Manuel's strength was beyond anything Kit had ever faced. Unnatural. Kit searched for answers. What he found disturbed him. Manuel had used voodoo magic to enhance his physical strength. Even worse, Manuel had hired Lee to seduce Diana, knowingly endangering her to force the Phantom out of hiding. The mercenary Quill, who had killed Kit's father, had told Manuel that defeating the Phantom was the final trial in his path to becoming the greatest fighter in the world. Kit felt deep fury, but beneath it was guilt. He had waited too long. He had let fear and pride hold him back. Now Diana had become a pawn in someone else's game because of his silence. For so long he had buried himself in his missions, in the mask. He hadn't just been hiding from the world, he had been hiding from himself. He found Diana and told her everything. She was stunned. Lee's betrayal was bad enough, but Kit's silence cut even deeper. She accused him of using her presence to feel human again, not only to return when it suited him, but to simply be alive again. Kit didn't argue. He admitted she was right, that for too long he had let the Phantom define him. But he wasn't there to win her back. He was there to stop Manuel, and he needed her help. Diana wrestled with a hard truth of her own. She realized that she had a pattern. She gave her heart too easily to people who needed saving and needed fixing. First Kit, then Drax, now Lee. She saw how often she had put others' needs before her own, losing herself in the process. This time, she decided to fight, not for someone else, but for herself. Together they set a trap. Through Lee, they lured Manuel into a final confrontation. Kit challenged him, not with no magic, no tricks, just true contest of skill and strength. Enraged and prideful, Manuel agreed. He removed his enchanted amulet and prepared to fight. Before the battle began, the Phantom gave his ring to Diana, asking her to protect it. And as a symbol of trust, he said, "No more secrets, not anymore." The fight was brutal. Kit and Manuel pushed each other to their brink. Meanwhile, Lee made a last attempt at betrayal, trying to steal the ring from Diana. She was no longer someone to be used. She fought back and won, finally taking control of her own story. Kit eventually overcame Manuel, barely standing at the end. The police arrived and confiscated the magical relics, locking them away so that they could not harm anyone else. In the quiet aftermath, Kit and Diana stood face to face, not as rescuer and rescued, but as equals. They had seen each other at their worst. They had confronted their own flaws and come out stronger. Kit offered her another ring, not one of protection, but as a promise of honesty, partnership, and a life lived without secrets. And this time, Diana did not need saving. She chose him because she wanted to. Finally, they were able to express their love for one another fully. Post-credit scene. After having escaped the Devil's Vortex and having talked with Manuel about the Phantom, Quill was found by a mysterious figure. He asked Quill what he knew about the different kinds of magic and fighting. Quill indicated that he knew enough. The man then asked him if Quill would like a job as his head of security in his growing organization. Quill quickly accepted the job offer.